running for their lives, some losing their lives in the process, others making an incredible escape.
Okay, how many people do you think are on your jet? 800 people on your jet? Holy cow.
Nations scrambling to evacuate their people and those who served alongside them.
I am in real trouble because of my work. Please, UK government, do not punish my family. Do not leave them behind.
An Australian military rescue mission with more than 250 troops is poised to swoop. The evacuation delayed by chaos at the airport.
I know the overriding concern of the veterans I've spoken to has been for us to protect those who worked alongside us. 1,800 have already been brought to Australia, 430 just since April of this year, and more will come.
Exactly how many more remains a mystery, the PM admitting some will be left behind.
Despite our best efforts, I know that support won't reach all that it should. We wish it were different.
Those words cold comfort for Afghans who put their lives on the line for Australia and are now paying the price. Some desperately evading the Taliban as they push for long-awaited visas. Others who did make it out now terrified for the families they left behind.
Our family is under target. They've been attacked already and they can be killed any minute because of the result of our employment. Their younger sisters or all the interpreters, they will be kept as a captive for sexual needs of the Taliban.
I have not slept in properly because I'm literally every second I'm calling and in contact with the people and trying to figure out the situation. People have been taken out of their house at night. The next day we find them dead bodies.
The former ADF interpreters pleading with the Prime Minister to do better for those who, just like our troops,
run to the sound of the guns because that is what we ask of them.
If our service was important to them, they should act like very urgently, issue them visas or move them to Australia.
It's not too late. We stand side by side, shoulder by shoulder to the armed force in the hope to bring peace, and we'll risk everything. Right now, we need you, sir.
Minister for Defence Peter Dutton joins us now. Minister, we're hearing from veterans and lawyers that are working on this that the Afghans who served with Australians have been waiting in many cases on clearances for a year now. Why has Australia failed where other countries have managed to get people out?
Well, 2 points, Waleed, and the complete opposite's the case because over the last few months we've been able to get 430 people out and that's probably more than most others. We took military advice to remove our staff from the embassy, our DFAT staff, our defence staff and the local engaged employees that had visas. We've done that well before the tragic events that we're seeing at the moment. The second point is that we've been able, over the last 8 years, to take about 1,800 people out. And why are some cases protracted? Because in some circumstances, somebody who worked for us 10 years ago and was an ally has now found themselves working for the Taliban or has questionable character otherwise, and that person that poses a security risk we're not taking. So there are some very complex cases, but the ramp up over the last few months has seen a record number of people already arrive in Australia.
Do you accept that we have a moral obligation to the people of Afghanistan and particularly the families of Afghan Australians?
Yes, and where people are persecuted otherwise, our country has a very proud record of settling people on a permanent basis. On a per capita basis, no other country except for Canada settles more refugees than Australia does. We do it on a permanent basis, and as the UNHCR point out, Australia is amongst the 1 or 2 top countries in the world in terms of settlement services and providing support to those people to settle, to get an education, to access the health system, housing, etc. And we will provide humanitarian support, as we've done already, to 8,500 Afghanis who have been issued visas since 2013.
OK, so I want to come back to some of those questions about humanitarian support in a moment, but it's not true to say that we provide this protection on a permanent basis all the time, is it? I mean, we do have temporary protection visas. We have a lot of Afghans in Australia on temporary protection visas. If we are interested in permanent protection, will we abolish that? Will we make those permanent refugees, particularly in the case of Afghan refugees?
Well, there are people on many nationalities that are on a temporary protection visa.
Sure,
at
I
the
understand,
moment.
but this is a very particular circumstance that we're talking about now.
And in relation to the Afghanis here at the moment, we wouldn't be sending anybody back, and the Prime Minister's been very clear about that, because the in-country advice would be very clear, and that is it's not safe for people to return to Afghanistan.
But would you make their visas permanent, or will you keep them as temporary protection visas?
They're temporary protection visas at the moment. We've been clear about that being a very significant part of the policy to secure our borders, and at the same time to bring in a record number of people under the humanitarian program in an orderly way on flights to help them settle in Australia. And individual cases obviously are looked at depending on the circumstances.
But you just said that we give protection on a permanent basis, and yet here is a visa category that explicitly doesn't give it on a permanent basis. And now, even with these developments, we're not about to extend that.
Well, for example, the Yazidi women that we brought out of the Middle East, many of whom had been slaughtered, raped, pillaged by ISIL, they have found a new home in Australia on a permanent basis, and they've been brought into Australia on planes in an orderly way. They are restarting their lives. It's an amazing story for our country. We're one of the most successful countries in the world in settling those women and their families. And in the circumstances at the moment with Afghanistan, of course we're not sending anybody back to Afghanistan. We've been very clear about that, and we've got the balance right.
Interesting you mentioned the example of the Yazidis, because of course at that time the Abbott government decided to expand the number of humanitarian visas that it was providing specifically for that group of people. In this case, we've seen Canada already has offered to take 20,000 additional Afghan refugees. They did that just last week. Given your history and what Canada's doing, will you be doing something similar now?
Well, firstly, our priority is to get Australian citizens out, and also New Zealand citizens. We're helping to get those out that might be working for NGOs or contractors, or they might be dual nationals who are there for family or business reasons, and they've taken a decision to stay in Kabul even right up until now. So that's the first priority. The second priority, obviously, is to remove those people, bring them to Australia, Afghani nationals who have helped Australia that might have been waiting for a commercial flight that's now been cancelled, or people otherwise that are in need. So I think that's the priority, and the Prime Minister's been again clear before the circumstances of the last couple of days to point out that we will take more people from Afghanistan, and we'll do that through the refugee humanitarian program.
That sounds like that will reduce then the spaces that are available to the rest of the world, which is a slightly different thing to what you did in the case of Syria and what Canada's doing in the case of Afghanistan. I mean, you can walk and chew gum at the same time. I get there are priorities, but you can do more than one thing at once. Why couldn't you just create that extra buffer, say 20,000, and say that's an additional humanitarian intake given the circumstances?
Well, again, for us, the priority is to get those people who are in imminent fear of their, losing their lives at the moment or significant harm to them. I want people out of that situation as quickly as possible, as much as anybody else. But we've got to do it in a way that's safe for them and safe for our country. Just
finally, we keep hearing from the Afghan Australian community, particularly those who have fled and are here now, that they can't get their families back. There is no way, they're not allowed really to get their families back here. And those people are now saying that they're getting knocks on the door, their family is getting knocks on the door from the Taliban. Why would anyone help us again in future if that's the price that is paid, if they've helped us, and that even people who can make it out here can't ever see their families again?
Well, to be fair, I think if you speak to Afghani Australians now, firstly, they're incredibly grateful for the service of our diggers over the last 20 years, because countless lives have been saved, not just in Afghanistan, but in Syria and elsewhere. And we have helped, as I say, over the last 8 years, 8,500 people to get visas, 1,800 of them locally engaged employees that helped our Australian soldiers. That includes their family members, but there may be extended family members who aren't eligible under the locally engaged employment program to come to Australia, but they will be eligible to come potentially under the humanitarian program. So I think the extent of the offering and the places that we've offered the people that we've already got here is something that they would readily acknowledge, and I think they're very grateful for.
Peter Dutton, thanks for speaking to us.
Thanks, Waleed.
God, it's such a tough thing. Those images, they are so incredibly distressing. No.